He had fought for the Philippine Scouts during World War II and survived the Bataan Death March. From the time I was old enough to understand, my parents enforced to me, and for a lot of people this is a platitude, and I hear it over and over again, but for me it is a lived experience, that entry into this country and citizenship in this country is a privilege, and privilege is not a pejorative. It is not a right, and it's not an entitlement. And I started out my newspaper career, if some of you are from nearby California, at the Los Angeles Daily News. And back then my ear was to the ground of the grassroots. If any of you are veterans of the Save Our State initiative, it really was the opening salvo in the grassroots battle against the elites on immigration enforcement. And I took the lessons that I learned there up to the Pacific Northwest, the crazy, anarchic Pacific Northwest, learned from Border Patrol and ICE about the problems on the northern border. And as many of you know me, it culminated after the 9/11 attacks in my first book called Invasion, the name borrowed from Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which too many people in Washington have forgotten, the role and duty of the federal government to protect the states against invasion. So Open Borders, Inc., which is coming out in September, is really the final in a trilogy for me. It's like my Star Wars trilogy, okay? Invasion, Sold Out, which talked about the economic impact of mass immigration and the role that pipelines like the H-1B expansion have played in sabotaging American tech workers at the expense of corporate interests and lobbyists. And now Open Borders, Inc., which collects the dots and connects the dots on who's funding America's destruction. We have to stop it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're going to take a 5-minute break now, and we will resume our program in that period of time.
I was born in a little village in Pakistan. In my case, I was promised to my cousin when I was born. There in that living room of my parents, my mother, my father, and a Muslim scholarly person, and my cousin from Pakistan. They had invited him to come over, and you know how they did that? They adopted him as their son.
To get around the immigration visa.
Yes, so he was adopted. The Muslim scholar, he folded his hands, said, you know what happens in Islam when you leave the religion. And I knew what happens. It's the death penalty. Normally you get 3 days. That's Sharia law. You get 3 days.
To recant.
It's torturing the convert so that he can become Muslim again. And if they don't, then you kill them. Please don't let us do what we have to do otherwise.
A Muslim mayor in New York, a Muslim mayor in London, whole Muslim towns in America, in the Midwest, in Michigan, in Minnesota. As Islam spreads throughout the West, Europe, the United States, many people are scratching their heads. They don't seem to know what we're dealing with, myself included, which is why I'm so pleased to sit down today with Sabatina James, who has experienced Islam firsthand in Pakistan, in Europe, and all of the attendant death threats, a forced marriage, living as a refugee or a fugitive. Sabatina, thank you so much for being here.
Hello.
Your story is unbelievable. Unfortunately, it has to be believed. You're born in Pakistan, Muslim. You end up in Austria and Germany, put into a forced marriage, refusing a forced marriage with your cousin, converting to Christianity. Take us back to the beginning.
I was born in a little village in Pakistan. My grandfather was an imam, and from the very early age, I grew up hearing his voice through the minarets, calling people to prayer 5 times a day. And he was always very proud of me because I was a very eager student of the Quran. Nothing mattered to me more than going to paradise. And I knew from the early beginning that the only direct way to paradise is to die for Allah in killing the infidels. That was what everyone believed. It wasn't nothing special. But I tried to please Allah. I mean, I was a child. I just tried to please Allah with reading the Quran in Arabic without understanding it. That's how most Muslims read the Quran, because the Quran is not like the Bible, where we read the Bible, it's God's word, we try to understand it, but we read the Quran in order to memorize it.
Because I think most people think that the Quran is just, it's like the Bible, you know.
Yeah.
I guess it's in Arabic, and it's, you know, the Muslim version. That basically it's the same thing.
Yeah, no, it is not. But I learned the Quran in Arabic, read the whole thing by the age of 10. And my father was already in Austria, and he used to come to visit us, I think about every year or two. And I have 2 brothers and a sister. And yeah, then I came to Austria as a little child and was completely shocked with the 2 worlds. And I remember having one of these neighbors who had a child, a daughter, and she had children, and she wasn't married. And I just couldn't wrap my head around this.
How does that even happen?
Yeah, because in Pakistan, they would have soaked her in gasoline and set her alight, or buried them alive. As happened recently in Pakistan, 5 women were buried alive just because they refused the arranged marriage that their family had chosen for them. They wanted to marry men of their own choices. 3 of them were actually teenagers. So this stuff happens every single day. We just don't hear about this in the West because you can't point out all these human rights violations without the accusation of malice and Islamophobia.
Islamophobia, that's always the word.
Yeah, I mean, Mamdani talked about Islamophobia, right? Throughout his whole campaign, right? It's just unbelievable. Here's a guy whose mom is an Oscar-nominated filmmaker. Dad is professor at Columbia. He's mayor of New York. And he's whining about Islamophobia.
He's the victim.
Yeah. And I love how he was actually talking about some of his aunts, I think.
Yes. Zerafui, I think is what he called it.
That is the funniest thing, that she's so terrified taking the train or something because, you know, the vicious New Yorkers would just come and probably attack her. And I'm going, you know, I would understand if the New Yorkers, the Christians, would say that and say, I'm so scared going out because there are Muslims here and they, you know, and they just killed about 3,000 of our people.
Yeah.
But they don't do that.
You know, it's very strange. In New York, I'm in New York originally, New York on 9/11. After 9/11, the public opinion of Islam in America increased. Yeah. It's not that it decreased. It's not that there was Islamophobia. It was totally the opposite.
Yeah.
There was more Islamophilia.
Yeah, I know.
But it seemed like a lot of Americans, still seems like it today, don't really seem to know what Islam is, what political Islam's goals are, what any of it means.
Yeah.
So you're in Austria.
Yes.
You're confused as to why your neighbor wasn't burned alive for having a child out of wedlock. Yeah. How old are you at this point?
Because I was about 9 or 10, yeah. So, yeah, and this village where we landed was very Catholic. We were the only Pakistani Muslim family there. And they were very proud of their faith. And the first thing you notice coming, the first revelation of Christianity, to me anyways, was Jesus on the cross. Present in every classroom. You go hiking, that's a big thing in Austria, right? And all the trails, you go to people's houses, in the living rooms, you would have the cross. And so they were really very proud, and it certainly, the first seeds were sown there for my later conversion, because when I was in Dedar, where I grew up in this little village, you know, I used to hear the voices of women. They would cry out aloud because they were beaten by their husbands. And the reason they would scream so loud is they wanted help. Police doesn't come. So they're expecting the villagers to help. And the villagers would come, but they would surround the victim and accuse her. And when I came to Austria, in this little village, every morning in the classroom, the children would surround someone who was beaten and bruised, and they would look up to the victim and pray to him, because that was Jesus on the cross. And that to me was the most striking difference between the world shaped by Muhammad and the world shaped by love. So that was, I always found that very fascinating, because I think somehow even without understanding the theology of Christianity, Jesus on the cross fascinated me. And to this day, I don't need theological books.
Yeah.
Just looking and gazing at him on the cross, that to me is Christianity.
So you're 9 or 10 years old. You have this revelation.
Yeah.
It's a very tangible one. It's Christ on the cross.
Yeah.
Do you think, oh, well, maybe I'll leave Islam. Maybe I'll become Christian?
No way.
No.
It just was. This little seed, I was fascinated by it, but no, I was still very proud to be a Muslim. And I read the Quran, and the thing is, in Islam, we do not believe in the core teachings of Christianity, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and divinity of Jesus. We don't believe in it. And
this is fascinating, because a lot of people who I think are struggling to understand Islam, they seem to think that there's a lot of affinity. So sometimes you'll see this on the internet. They'll say, oh, Islam is actually very nice and reverent about Christ or Our Lady. But I remember, I read the Quran when I was young, not as young as you, and I remember the denial of the crucifixion, which made me think about the letter to the Philippians. I think it's the letter to the Philippians, where St. Paul writes, there are many walking now, and I tell you, even weeping, who are enemies of the cross of Christ. I always found that to be interesting. What is it about being an enemy of the cross of Christ? And of course, the cross is where Christ conquers death.
Exactly. And the thing is, Islam considers the belief in the Trinity as the greatest sin, because it's called shirk, associating partners with Allah. And I mean, people don't have. It's actually frightening how little Christians know about what Islam teaches about them.
What does it teach?
Surah 98, verse 6, that Christians are among the worst of creatures. And they have three options. They can either convert to Islam, then they are safe, or they can, if they don't convert to Islam, they can pay the jizya, which is a tax for being non-Muslims. And if they don't, they have to be fought. And Jesus in Islam, he will return and he will break the crosses and he will kill all the pigs. And the most influential Quran commentators say that this means the end of Christianity. Jesus will come to fight against Christianity and he will fight for the sake of Islam.
It's not quite the Jesus we find in the Bible or history or known by the people who knew him in his sojourn on earth and their disciples. So there's a great hostility, obviously, to Christianity in Islam.
Yes.
Which you're aware of as you're in Austria encountering Christ on the cross for the first time. Yes.
Yeah, and then, we moved away from this little village. And then I ended up in Linz, which is close to that, also close to Salzburg. Austria is, we were talking about, you recently went to Salzburg.
I was just recently in Austria.
Yes, I mean, Austria has no equal among the nations.
Yeah.
And I had to say that. Not only because we are Habsburg and Mozart, it's just also stunningly beautiful.
Yes.
And, but so I came to Linz, and in Linz, everything looked different. It felt like it was home to the entire world because all the immigrants went to the big cities. And that classroom looked very different. No one prayed to the man on the cross there. We had Islamic education in the public school. That is normal in Austria. Every public school has Islamic education. And, I mean, people are not aware of that. But, for example, in Vienna, Muslims have outnumbered Catholics in primary schools.
I had no idea. Because, you know, a little bit of the history is that Islam tries to conquer Europe almost immediately, and it makes it to within 150 miles of Paris in 732, Battle of Poitiers. Then they tried again, well, they keep trying it, but they tried again notably in 1571 with the Battle of Lepanto. But then the last of these three great battles was the Battle of Vienna. It was the largest cavalry charge in history. Jan Sobieski happily boots the Muslims back again. And then what you're saying is, well, actually, now they've just invited not only Muslim people in, but Islam to be taught in schools.
Yeah, so I don't think Muslims need jihad to conquer the West. They just need the West to keep apologizing for who they are while they push their agenda. We used to actually make fun of that as Muslims. You know, how weak the Christians are. And we had a powerful weapon with the accusation of Islamophobia. I mean, in our classroom, we had Turks and Bosnians and Albanians, and then we had the blonde Michael and Michaela who used to come in, and every time they came in, we used to say, "Immigrants out!" And they were just like little lambs. They wouldn't say anything because they knew that if they say something, we would accuse them of racism. Right. And they did not want to be labeled as that. And the only people that stand up to the Muslims are the Russians. The Muslims don't mess with the Russians. My bodyguards were usually Russian later on. I don't trust anyone else.
Those Russians are made of pretty tough stuff.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they are. I remember at one lecture, and, you know, unfortunately, my last years in Europe were always with police protection at my public events, and I had these two Russian guards standing here, and some Pakistani Christians wanted to come and have my books, have the book signed, And then he would just not step forward. I was going, "Brother, what's going on?" He said, "He looks so scary."
Those are the bodyguards you want to have.
No, but that was Linz. And the reason why Europe got so hooked on immigration is that there was a labor gap, and they invited, after the Second World War, so that's where they invited the first Muslim migrants from Turkey and other Muslim lands. And they thought, oh, they're going to go away once their work is finished. But life was better in Europe, right? And so they stayed, and they imported the problems of Islam into the West.
And on top of that, you know, after the Second World War, obviously a lot of Europeans had been killed, so that's part of the labor gap. And they bring in the Muslims. On top of that, the Europeans stopped having children. So they don't reproduce. The labor problem continues and continues. They have to support an aging population supported by entitlements and welfare. And the Muslims do have a lot of children.
Yes.
And so all of a sudden you're seeing a major demographic shift.
Yeah, has been happening. I mean, how many years have I heard living in Austria and Germany don't have children because of climate change?
Climate change.
Don't have children. And then all of a sudden, the message changed overnight. Angela Merkel was of the opinion we need more people because we don't have enough children. And so instead of encouraging their own women to have more children, they just decided to replace the next generation with Muslim migrants. And this is what has been happening.
No, you will be accused, by the way, of an Islamophobic, racist conspiracy theory. Because if you say that populations in the West have been replaced,
yes,
that is now. If the people who are actually in charge of the political order, the Angela Merkels of the world, if they say we want more migration to fill up our countries, that's not a conspiracy theory.
Yes.
But if someone who opposes it says the exact same thing, that is called beyond the pale, racist, Islamophobic, you're not allowed to say it.
Well, I mean, all these accusations are just used to shut down any conversation about Islam. So Islamophobia is a stupid word. I mean, it's so self-contradictory. What are phobias? Phobias are irrational fears. But fearing a religion that demands my death penalty is completely rational. You know, I mean, apostasy in Islam is considered such a grave sin that Islam demands the death penalty for it. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Whoever changes his religion, kill him." Well, now you can decide about how to kill him, stone him to death, or hang the person. But these are, I mean, even the laws in Muslim countries. I have friends in Iran and elsewhere who have parents that were stabbed to death just for converting to Christianity. And this sort of things happens all the time. We just, as I said, don't hear about it because the media covers up all these things, and like the persecution of Christians in the Muslim world.
A religion that's spread by the sword for 1,400 years is not going to change its stripes anytime soon, probably.
Yeah.
So you see this happening. You're right. It's very rarely reported on.
Yes.
So you're seeing this. You're in Linz. You're now in this Muslim community.
Yeah.
You had this reprieve of a Christian school, but now you're back in the Muslim school.
Yeah.
Are you still thinking about the man on the cross, or no?
Well, I think what I liked was the taste of freedom. The taste of freedom of seeing girls that were allowed to make their own choices. And I secretly envied them because in my case, I was promised to my cousin when I was born.
When you were born?
Yeah.
An arranged marriage when you were born to your cousin?
Yeah. My mother said to her sister that when I grew up, I will be married to her son. It's her sister.
Forget about arranged marriage for a second.
Yeah.
How common is marriage between cousins in Pakistan or the broader Islamic world?
Extremely common. In Pakistan, extremely common. I know so many people, Pakistani girls that had to marry their cousin. Yeah.
Why? Why do they do that?
I think it's not that explicitly Islam demands that, but sometimes I think it's to control the women. And if they stay within the family, it's easier. And in honor-based societies like Pakistan is, and many of the Muslim countries are, honor is just the most important value. And honor depends solely on how closely women follow Islamic tradition. And it's also very important, I think, in this interview to mention that when we are talking about Islam, we're not talking about Muslims. Muslims are not Islam.
Yeah. They're people.
Yeah, there are people that practice their religion to varying degrees. So when I talk about Islam, I do not talk about Muslims. I talk about the teachings of Muhammad. And that's, I think, an important distinction to make.
Certainly, because a Muslim, being a person, could believe anything he pleases.
Yes, and my entire family is Muslim. Yeah. And they too, within my family, practice the religion to varying degrees.
Yes.
You know, it's, yeah.
So your promise, speaking of your family, you're betrothed to your cousin when you're born.
Yes.
When is this supposed to come to fruition?
When my parents started to notice that I was integrating into Western culture. It first started with fights over swim classes because that was something that my parents considered as a very decadent Western thing.
To go swimming? To
go swimming because of the clothing that you should, that you wear. And then theater classes at school, which my parents thought were just for prostitutes. They watched Bollywood movies, but still, so every little freedom that everyone around me had, I had to fight for. And unfortunately, it was not just arguing. There was always a lot of violence in my family, and for just something that people don't understand, but I come from a culture where girls are killed over wearing a lipstick. It's something people can't wrap their head around.
Even hearing you say that, probably people are going to hear girls are punished for wearing lipstick. Or
I mean, give you an example. Yeah. There was a young woman in Pakistan. Her name was Kandil Baloch. She was an online personality, and she dared to take a picture with a Muslim man and posted it online. And her brother thought that is very, very dishonorable, and he murdered her. Then he went to prison and was let go by the Pakistani government, because when an honor killing happens and the family of the victim forgives the perpetrator, then he is out. And in this case, it was the son of the same parent, so he said, we forgive him, so he's out. These are official laws in the country. People sometimes think, this is just some few radicals that are doing this.
Yes.
No, these are you when you're raped. For example, I've interviewed women who were victims of gang rape in Pakistan, and many don't have the courage to even report the case. They drink poison and kill themselves. But in this case, this woman was so brave. She reported the case. And first to put them into prison because international media was there. When they were gone, let them all out. They're free because she has to bring 4 male witnesses to prove the rape. And if you can't, you go to prison for adultery.
Because even I, when I've read plenty of these cases, and I thought, it's just some radical or it's some tribal. When you hear about honor killings, you think this is extrajudicial.
Yeah.
You're saying, no, this is embedded in the law, in the government.
And sometimes they have things on paper just to look good, so to get funded by Western governments, but it's actually not applied. So Pakistan prides itself, for example, with, we have laws against honor killings. Here it is. But that's how it looks like reality, like in this case. Sometimes governments, human rights activists will fight for certain people, and then, if you're lucky, you can get out of prison or so. But for a lot of people, there is no justice. And the victims suffer. I mean, I'm right now helping a girl. She's 14 years old, and she was raped by a Muslim man, one of the neighbors, while she was taking care of her baby sister. He just came in and did that to her. And what do these people do? They threaten the entire family and say, we are going to wipe you out if you report the case. And often they're scared to even file a report, because there have been cases like the case of poor Shazia Bashir. She was a 12-year-old girl who worked for a Muslim lawyer, and that man raped and tortured her to death. The mom went to report the case at a police station, and they said to her, can't be filed against the lawyer.
Because he's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer. Yeah, that's it. I see this every single day in my work, and the victims are getting younger and younger. Recently, the victim we took care of was 6 years old. 6 years old, she was playing outside, and a Muslim from the neighborhood comes, grabs her, takes her to the fields, rapes her so brutally, and then leaves her there to die. She's bleeding and screaming in pain. And what happens? She's discovered and brought to the hospital. He has torn her uterus, and that poor child had to be in the hospital for 3 months just to. But he has ruined her. She's never going to have a normal life again, and that is what's happening to little girls, not just in Pakistan. I see it all the time in Afghanistan. I am a humanitarian, so sometimes people send me footage of child brides, and I recently saw this one, which was so horrifying. There's this little girl, she's tiny, and she's with her parents, and then comes in a stranger who is the age of her grandfather, and father and mother hand her over to the strangers. A few prayers are said, and she is trying to grab her parents to hold on to them, and they walk away. And this poor girl with a teeny tiny suitcase is now walking home with a stranger, and she's resisting, he holds her hand, and she's just resisting because she doesn't want to go. She's let go, and that little girl is just been sentenced to rape for a lifetime by her own parents. And you know what they say when people like I come and say, don't do that? Or liberal Muslims come and say, don't do that, this is not Islam. They confront you with the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad, his youngest wife was 6 when he was about 50. And that is the problem, that the role model Muhammad, that the Quran explicitly says is the greatest role model for all mankind, that has not been reformed. And
I suppose in that telling,
yes,
it can't be reformed, because in Christianity, where the man happens to be God and is a perfect man, then he really is the perfect role model.
Yes.
And you'll never go wrong by emulating Christ. But in the case of Muhammad, who is a false prophet, who committed all sorts of sins and foibles, if you say this is the man to emulate, then that's just going to be baked into the entire religion.
False prophet. I feel like we're going to die, Michael.
I hope not. Maybe you'll have to up my
We're going to be the first martyrs under Mamdani.
Yeah. I already planned to avoid New York after he got elected. So you've got this horrible problem where you're just seeing this episode after episode after episode, but then everyone's going to ask, why on earth would the parents give the little girl over to some old man? Because of their religiosity or something else?
Because they want to go to paradise. And then you include the economic situation in these very, very poor countries. And so it's a combination of a lot of factors. Then, if you can marry your girl off to someone who brings you a lot of money, and you are practicing Sunnah, which is doing as the Prophet Muhammad did. So it's a win-win on both sides. So I have met child brides. In one of the first victims I helped, I have an organization, a foundation that helps these sorts of girls. And she was a child when she was married off in Afghanistan. And they always say the same stories. I mean, in her case, her parents were shot by the Taliban. And then she was married off to her nephew. Yes. And he had, I think it was her arm or something that was broken, but she was in pain when I met her. And she had converted to Christianity. And Germany wanted to send her back. That's the thing, the Salafists Hamas supporters, and all the other Islamists, they're allowed to stay.
Right.
And the girls that integrate, that take off their headscarves and even convert to Christianity, they have to go back. Anyways, I fought for her, and she was allowed to stay with her 2 little children that she had from that marriage. But when you listen to these girls and their stories, how many of the girls don't survive because they're so little? And I've heard of cases where the little girl actually became pregnant and then struggled for days to deliver a child and then died herself. Because the little bodies are not built for it.
Of course, of course.
And so this is what is happening, and I'm astonished about the human rights movement in the West that always says that they care so much about these Muslim women. No, they don't. They don't talk about this. No, they're protecting an ideology, and even people that are trying to point out that this is happening in the Muslim world are considered racist, bigots, Islamophobic monsters, like my friend, who is a journalist from Pakistan. She's an atheist. She was persecuted there. She came to Germany, and she said it is astonishing how the liberal left abandons all the human rights activists that come from
and
a religion of peace.
Class,
yeah.
Yes, yeah, and is the religion of peace, which, you've read the Quran much more deeply than I have. That was not the impression I got when I read the Quran. That it was. In fact, the reason I read the Quran was because all the liberals in the West kept saying it was a religion of peace. I was 14. I said, that doesn't sound right. Yeah. And I read it, and I said, yeah, it doesn't seem quite right.
Yes.
Betrothed to your cousin, you're taken in by the West and by freedom, and you want to do these radical, crazy things like go swimming or maybe play or something. And your parents don't like this very much.
No.
So then what happens?
Well, they discovered that I was holding hands with a boy at school. That was the only friendship I had with this young boy who was an exchange student from North Carolina. He was an Albanian Muslim who introduced me to Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre.
And I don't know what to make of this man.
It's how I learned English.
With Snoop Dogg?
Yeah.
There are so few isms in your diction. How odd.
No, that's my first impression of the U.S. was they're all black.
They smoke pot all the time, every day. Wow, that's an Albanian Muslim
from
North Carolina introducing you to Snoop Doggy Dogg.
Yes, and he had a friend from the Bronx who was there, Emmanuel. Maybe he watches this interview. He's going to know, hey, it's her.
Hello, Emmanuel. Hi.
And, when they discovered that I was beaten so badly by my mother.
By your mother?
Yes.
Not by your father. You would think
yes.
The father would be the disciplinarian.
No.
Your mother.
It's mostly, unfortunately, the women. Because women lose face if their children do not grow up to live Islam according to tradition. And there's an entire society, parallel society within the Western communities that is watching the girls. That's what people don't realize. So there's a lot of pressure. Huh. And so I was just not allowed to belong to the world that I was growing up in. That was the problem. And and they considered the West as just very decadent. And I used to hear this from Muslims in my community. Look at the Christians, their brothels are full, their churches are empty, and when their parents are old, they dump them in old age homes. I mean, they're not wrong.
I hate to say the Muslims have a point. But they do have a point.
Yes. And they were just also afraid that I will become like that. And so what happened then was they said, we have a vacation planned in Pakistan. And I was scared of this. And when my mother beat me so brutally, I went into a shelter because the beatings happened so often that my teachers, who noticed that, said, "This is not normal. You need to go to a shelter." And the social workers already knew me. And so I ended up there, and I told them I'm very scared to go back to Pakistan for vacation because my aunt had called and said that she was ready to have me as her daughter-in-law. And I was 16, and I was just a teenager at school, and now I was supposed to be a wife. I wasn't ready for that. But my parents, I mean, they're not the Taliban. My father is this extremely handsome, charming man. You know, they couldn't believe that they would do this to me.
Of course. And I think a lot of people watching probably think,
yeah,
especially when you see what's happened to New York and London, Dearborn, Michigan, and all the rest, you think, well, look, obviously there's some kind of crazy guys living in caves with big beards and Casio watches, and those are the ones you have to really watch out for. But, you know, all the rest, it's probably just like some slightly different form of Christianity or something.
No, we weren't that. My brothers are highly educated, and my mom doesn't even wear a headscarf. But still, these were the things that were going on in my family. And we went back. They sent me back because I was a minor. And my parents promised that they will not force me to marry my cousin. And so we went back to Pakistan. And when we arrived there, my passport was taken. I was literally locked in that little house of my cousin. And I was invited into a room where all my family members were sitting, and they said that they were now ready. My aunt said she was now ready to have me as her daughter-in-law, and I refused. And I was the first girl in the history of my family to refuse a marriage, and which was a great shame for my father. And I love my father. I still love my father. And I did not want to shame him, but I just could not live with a man that I did not love. I wanted to make my own choices. My mother beat me, and this time there was no one to call, no police, and no social services. You know, when I'm talking about beating, it's not just, I give you a slap. That's normal in my culture.
Yeah.
My mom used to grab my hair and drag me through the apartment. And often when I went to school, I would lock myself in the toilet because I was so afraid of her. And this is how my school day started often. And in that case, I was now there. My family decided to leave me behind, and they went back to Austria. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. No passport, no phone, nothing. And then they decided, decisions were made for me. I was not allowed to make decisions. And they said they're going to go and visit a few schools with me. And the schools they visited weren't just normal schools where other children went. They were madrasas. Madrasa is a religious seminary, basically, or as some people call it, jihad factories. Because these are the very places where the Taliban and other radical Muslim groups recruit the next generation of jihadis. The men come and learn and memorize the Quran to fight for Allah, and the women are there for submission, to learn submission. And there are over 30,000 of these madrasas just in Pakistan alone. And what you learn there, you learn nothing else but the Quran and the Hadith and how to enforce them with violence. When I arrived there, I noticed that there were no chairs, no beds, no desks, except a piece of carved wood on which the Quran was laid. And for almost 12 hours a day, we were just indoctrinated with the Quran, reciting the Quran and praying the namaz. And when there were girls that disobeyed, they put them in the courtyard and they would punish them so badly that they would scream, and we were forced to hear and watch it. And what did they achieve was that if you treat one like this, none of the others
Of course.
are going to come and resist. It was a time of hell. I mean, I've described this hell in my book. And the only way for me to get out of that was to marry the cousin. And I thought, I will marry him, then I will go back to Austria, and then I will divorce him.
Right, right.
And that's exactly what happened. He came, or almost what happened, because it was actually then an engagement. My father came, and he couldn't afford to bring the entire family back, and said that we will do the marriage later, we will do the engagement. And so that's what happened. I came back to Austria after the engagement with the cousin and started my school. And that's where everything then changed when I met Joseph, the evangelical Christian.
This is not the Albanian Muslim from North Carolina.
No.
This is a different...
No. The Albanian Muslim, I mean, he was... That was just... Our relationship was listening to Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre and holding hands. That's what we did.
Weirdly
because
wholesome,
we're both
yes.
Muslims, right? Yeah. So, but you know, here and then I met Joseph, and he was like no other Christian I'd met before, because he actually brought his Bible to school. And I just said to him, "What happened to you?" And he said, "I've gotten to know Jesus." And I just thought, this guy used to stand in the smoker's corner with the guy who had dreadlocks, or maybe he's on drugs, I don't know, you know, but he was very much on fire for Jesus. And he was trying to bring me the good news. And I was just thinking, no, this is bad news. It's going to get me killed.
This is definitely going to be bad news in my family, that's for sure.
Yeah. But once I told him about my problems with my family, and he said, "You must pray." And I said, 5 times a day I pray.
Yeah.
And he said, "Maybe you're praying to the wrong God, because obviously he's not hearing you." I love the evangelicals. They do that sort of thing, you know.
They're very blunt.
We don't do that.
No.
We just, you know, it's for us.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of kids, you get them to the Latin Mass.
Yes.
That's the extent that we do.
The Catholics, we're like a little more subtle sometimes. Yeah. But the evangelicals, they're so forthright, they just drop it all blunt as can be.
Drop the bomb.
Yes. Yes.
And I just thought when he said that, that's section 295A in the Pakistani Penal Code. You would go to prison in my country for saying that. You know, that's actually true.
Wow.
We have a blasphemy law that actually puts people into prison if they criticize Islam. And that's what they want to enforce in the West. That's why they're always whining about Islamophobia, because they're not used to criticism. Anyways, in my case, he then gave me a Bible. It was a gift close to Christmas, and Old Testament, New Testament, and a map of Israel. Like, seriously, I'm a Muslim. You don't like the truth.
At least that page you have to take out if you're bringing it home.
Anyways, he did that, and then I was sitting on my bed. My parents were now forcing me to sign the marriage certificate so that I'm officially married, and my cousin could come to Austria. And so there were battles about this, and I was praying to Allah to help me, and nothing happened. And that one night, I took the Bible home, and it was an incalculable risk for me to take it home. But I'm a risk taker for the truth, so I did. And that night I said, who are you? Buddha, Allah, Krishna, Jesus. And so my gaze fell on the Bible that Joseph gave me. We have weird ideas about Christianity. I have a friend, her mom is an Indian Muslim. And she was saying, you know, the Christians. They had the Old Testament. It was too difficult, so they found the new one, so that their women can wear bikini and not be guilty about it. It's funny, but that sort of talk is very common at Muslim dinner tables.
Wow. Well, it's amazing, though, because the New Testament was written in the 1st century A.D., and when was the bikini invented? 1945 or something like that? I don't know. Okay. There was a gap in there. But,
I know, but
took a while.
This is the sort of thing. So I was, holding this book in my hand, God, who are you? And I just randomly opened the Bible. And the first sentence I read was, whoever searches me with a pure heart will find me. Whoa. There was an answer. And
that happens. People, it happens.
Yes.
I don't mean to make it sound like a magic trick or something, because it's not. But that happens. People just open the Bible, or they look over, and it just happens to be on a page with exactly
the same.
Exactly what you need to see.
And then I started to do what Joseph told me. Read the New Testament. So I started to read. And I did what a lot of Muslims do. I started to compare Muhammad and Jesus. And I was especially struck by the story of Mary Magdalene. Because when the mob was eager to execute her, I just saw myself in her, with my entire family pressuring me. And I saw the women of my country in Mary Magdalene. And
I have to interrupt you. This is one of this is just kind of what we were talking about. I woke up today. I looked at my calendar, and someone had added a meeting with a news organization because they wanted me to talk about Mary Magdalene. And I haven't thought about Mary Magdalene in, I can't tell you how long. And I actually wrote to my publicist, I said, do I need to know more about, I'm not an expert on Mary Magdalene. She said, no, I just want to do the meeting. I have this whole meeting about this whole project about Mary Magdalene. I have no idea where this came from. It just appeared on my calendar. I didn't think about it afterward. And then you say that. That's what happens, though. That does that kind of thing happens.
I think Mary Magdalene maybe sent me. Should I speak to him, please?
Yeah, maybe.
No, I started to make mental comparisons between Muhammad and Jesus. An adulterous woman is brought to Muhammad, stoning for the woman. The same is brought to Jesus, mercy. Muhammad said, kill the infidels wherever you find them. And Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Muhammad said, I have been commanded to fight against all people until they testify that Muhammad is the messenger. And Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. Muhammad participated in over 27 battles personally as a warlord. And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. I mean, I could, continue with this list because there is so much to say. And actually, if people are asking, where is this actually written? I've pointed that all out. The only sources I'm using in this interview are the sources that are recognized as valid in classical Islamic theology. So I was most fascinated by Jesus, and I wanted to know more about him. And there was this movie that was aired at Easter about Jesus. And when the crucifixion came, my parents turned it off. I wanted to see why someone would sacrifice his life for his broken creatures. Because Allah is not interested in the brokenness of his creatures. You cannot have a relationship with him. You follow his rules. So I wanted to know about him, and so I ventured out to the city and to buy a copy. And everywhere I went, I was just met with snorts and chuckles. I think they were just like, who is this brown woman with an Austrian accent supporting a Jesus movie? What is this?
Almost as crazy as an Albanian Bosnian from North Carolina, yes.
And so I was going everywhere and I wasn't succeeding. And then I remembered something. Joseph used to say, Jesus lives and he loves you. And I said, hey, Jesus, if you're alive, please help me find this movie. And when my last attempt was unsuccessful, I just gave up, sat into the tram, and I just thought, even Jesus can't help me. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice, you're very pretty, aren't you a singer? And it was a man sitting across of me, and I just went, nah, I don't need that now.
Yeah. Oh, I've heard this line before, yeah.
And he said, I don't know, Fräulein, which is lady,
Yeah.
Fräulein, but I just have this feeling that I must give you something. And I said sarcastically, well, it's Christmas time, give me a gift.
Yeah.
And he just handed me this leaflet and then went off the tram. And I look at it and it says, call this hotline and receive one Jesus movie for free. And I just went, this is very interesting. I felt I was followed in my thoughts by someone, something that I wasn't used to. And while I was excited to have these little experiences, my head was speaking to me this reason. Your parents are not even happy that you don't want to marry your cousin. What are they going to say if you say, I actually want to exchange Jesus, Muhammad for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was going home, I just thought, I will just practice the faith secretly. Because I couldn't give up my family. That was the most important thing to me. And that night, of course, I stumbled upon the verses where Christ says, whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. So Jesus was a God of challenge, either all or nothing.
Yeah.
And it is for a lot of Muslims, it's not just a change of religion. You absolutely lose everything. You lose your family, you lose your friends, your community, and your identity. It's like suicide, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Jesus was asking me to die so that I can become like him. And that's the only thing that drove me to accept him, because I wanted to be like him. And there is so much to say, but I'm going to make it short. I always had this inner voice within me, strangely, even though Joseph was a evangelical, to go to the Catholic Church. The man on the cross was there. And I always followed him. So I went to this big cathedral in Linz and saw this holy water. And I thought, oh, it's some sort of ritual. So I was just making this weird sound.
Look around, something.
Making these weird sounds. And this young man comes and, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I have a meeting with the Pope today. He just looked at me going, the Pope's not here, yeah. But he brought me to the priest. And I tell the Catholic priest about my newfound love in Jesus Christ and the things that I was experiencing. And he said to me, it could be that Muhammad was a prophet too. We don't know.
The priest said this? This is in Austria?
This is in Austria.
Yeah.
This is the time where St. John Paul had kissed the Quran and people wanted to follow.
Yeah.
So all religions were a way to God. And I experienced that firsthand. So he let me go. He didn't tell me that I needed catechism. He didn't say, you should come and if there's any problem, come to my church and I'll give you a room if you have to flee. Nothing like that. He sent me home. And then I saw a nun. She had, she was properly suited and booted. She was on her bike and I made her stop. I was on fire for Jesus and I needed someone to speak with me. So she stopped. And very sweet. Catholic sisters are always so extremely sweet. And she said, yeah? I said, I believe in the same as you. And she didn't know what to do. And I just said, I was a Muslim. I wanted her to be happy.
Yeah.
And she said, all religions are a way to God.
Oh, my goodness.
We must just believe deeply in what we believe. And I just thought, if I believe deeply as a Muslim that killing an infidel is going to get me to heaven, is that a way to God?
How is that the way to go? This is, as you describe, I'm not even terrible. I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised by these experiences, especially in Austria and Germany. But truly, this is one of the great arguments. Hilaire Belloc made the point. The proof that the Catholic Church is divinely instituted is that if it weren't, bad clergy would have destroyed it 2,000 years ago. Unbelievable.
I love Hilaire Belloc. They've thrown him out somehow.
Yeah.
But, I love Hilaire Belloc. Yeah, anyways, but so I ended up back in the evangelical church, even though I always had this inner longing to go to the Catholic Church, but no one wanted me there. So the evangelicals took great care of me.
Yeah.
I mean, they even study Islam just for Muslim converts, just to go through what are the challenges they have. So they are most eager to accept converts. But to make a long story short,
don't make it too short.
There's so much to say. I've written 3 books. 2 bestsellers, by the way. About Sharia.
I'm not surprised. Right now, go to hallow.com/Knowles. Believe it or not, the Christmas season is right around the corner. As much as we might like to avoid the chaos, the shopping, the wrapping paper, the half-packed suitcases by the door, we cannot. The best thing we can do is lean into the season, and to do it right, to rediscover peace and purpose in the midst of all the noise. Often, Advent becomes a mere checklist. Gifts, travel plans, dinners, decorations, but it's worth asking, why do we have so much to do? What is all of this for? Well, that's one reason I'm very excited about my friends over at Hallow. This Advent, Hallow is leading a powerful challenge called Pray 25, Be Still. It's an invitation to step out of the modern frenzy and enter into the real story of Christmas, one that was anything but calm or comfortable. Think about it. A young mother whose life had just been upended, a good man mocked and misunderstood, and a tyrant seeking to kill their child. And yet, they found peace in the midst of it all. Through Hallow's Pray 25 Advent Challenge, you will meditate on Psalm 46. Be still and know that I am God. Join Jonathan Rumi, Chris Pratt, Sister Miriam James, Gwen Stefani, and more throughout this season. You will hear excerpts from The Read of God, an incredible book by a really remarkable woman, and The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry is a way to experience the Nativity not as a sentimental scene, but as a moment of profound stillness and divine order in a broken world. Before you get lost in wrapping paper and travel plans, take time this Advent to be still. Center your days on prayer, on silence, on the peace that only Christ can bring. You can get 3 months free of Hallow right now, hallow.com/Knowles. Get 3 months free of the #1 prayer app.
When my mom pressured me to sign the marriage certificate again, I had accepted Jesus in my heart. And she asked me to sign it. I said no, because I knew the breakup was coming. I said, God does not want that. She was completely perplexed. What God, So she took my clothing, packed it in a back, threw it out, and spat on me and said, if I would have known that you would become like this, I would have killed you when you were an infant. And so I was standing in front of I was standing, and I didn't even have the strength to call the elevator because I was just shaking. I was so weak. And I didn't know where to go, and I was just on the street. And I ended up in the homeless shelter for young adults. And I was probably the first Austrian to be homeless for Jesus.
In at least a few centuries, yeah.
I want to imitate Christ in all the different forms in his passion. So that was one.
Yeah, of course.
And so I ended up in this homeless shelter. And I've actually recently written to that shelter. I love those people that helped me there. Yeah. And they then recognized, because they knew me from before, that it was all a lie and deception, what they had received from my parents before. The thing is, you know, Michael, this is very normal. It's going to sound very horrible, and not all Muslims do that. But it was very, very normal for us Muslims to lie to non-believers because it wasn't considered a sin. And I would have friends that invite the Christians over who were best friends with them. And the Christians would go home singing, oh, that was so nice, and the hospitality of Muslims. And then what did we do? We separated their dishes, prayed the Muslim prayer over it because they're impure. And the Quran itself in Surah 5 says that a Muslim and a Christian cannot be friends. So if you have friendships, they have to be shallow friendships, never loyalty, especially in hard times when Islam's honor is at stake. I mean, that was normal. That's what we believed. Everyone believed that. So, and I think my parents saw in those social workers just a bunch of pig-eating infidels. That's how I perceived it. And you can lie to infidels, and that's what they did. And when I told them the whole story and that I had converted to Christianity, and they helped me to find an apartment. And the apartment happened to be right in front of a police station because God knew what was coming. Yeah. Right. Providence. Because when my parents found out, they called me home. And there in that living room of my parents, my mother, my father, and a Muslim scholarly person was there. And my cousin from Pakistan. They had invited him to come over, and you know how they did that? They adopted him as their son.
To get around the immigration visa.
Yes, so he was adopted. And by a liberal lawyer who fights for the rights of refugees, he helped them to get him into the country. So he was there, and the Muslim scholar, he folded his hands, said, you know what happens in Islam when you leave the religion. And I knew what happens. It's a death penalty. But I was just thinking, I'm living in Linz. How are they going to do that in Linz? Yeah. And he just said to me, you know, normally you get 3 days. That's Sharia law. You get 3 days.
To recant.
Yeah, yeah. So you can, and it's not just persuading the convert into accepting Islam again. No, it's torturing the convert so that he can become Muslim again. And if they don't, then you kill them. And that's not just a radical interpretation. That's, as I said, teaching of the Prophet Muhammad. And in my case, he said, we give you 2 weeks to come back. And otherwise, please don't let us do what we have to do otherwise. And I was just frozen because my family had just sentenced me to death in Linz.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I called a friend who was a non-practicing Tunisian man. So they just did this to me. And he said, you need to go to the police. But before I did that, I called Joseph. But Joseph, when I told him about the threats, his family was scared.
Yeah.
He didn't come. Because I'm going to come and help, and then all of a sudden he wasn't there. Too scared. So I ended up at the police station, told them the entire story. The policeman first said, why don't you convert back to Islam? I mean, what does it matter what religion you have, right?
Yeah, it's all fake anyway.
Yeah, so why don't you convert back to Islam? Then I told him everything that has happened, and then he went from one extreme to the other extreme, which was he needs to arrest my father because of all the violations.
Yeah.
But I didn't want him to arrest me. I started to cry. Then they called the psychologist because they were scared that I may be suicidal. That's the condition that I was in.
Yeah, of course.
And the psychologist evaluated me and said she's psychologically completely fine. But what they couldn't understand was that it wasn't just either being afraid of my parents or loving my parents. It was both.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to harm my parents. I just wanted them to
Not
protect
to
me.
You. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one day police starts investigating. Then I receive a letter. It's about your husband. And I just went, wait, I haven't married.
Yeah.
And turns out my father signed the marriage certificate himself. And all of a sudden I was married. But according to the world that he comes from, he wasn't doing anything wrong. Because in many cases, the bride doesn't even have to be present. It's just the men in the family who can sign for her. And then she's married. That's what he did in Austria. And by the way, I know of girls who've had that happen to them in Brooklyn and other places in the U.S. This is not just a European thing, okay? This is happening here. I have met victims in the U.S. who are going through similar things. And anyways, I went against that, and then my cousin called me and said, you're not going to experience this day anymore. And he hung up. And I knew he was coming for me.